the Murray Darling Basin. Let's listen.
Down in South Australia. I'm accompanied by Maryanne Slattery, the Australia Institute's senior water researcher, who spent more than a decade working in the management of the Murray Darling Basin. Three things are clear from the Royal Commission's report today. The first is that we need more water in the Murray Darling Basin. Our rivers need more water. 1 million dead fish can't be wrong, and 1 million dead fish are saying that we need more water returned to the rivers of the Murray Darling Basin. The second key thing to take from the Royal Commission is that we need a new plan. The Murray Darling Basin Plan, or at least the way it's been implemented to date, is not working. We need a major overhaul of the plan, or at least the way it's being implemented. The last thing that's very clear from the Royal Commission's report is that heads need to roll at the Murray Darling Basin Authority. It's clear that the way our basin is managed and the institutions that have been charged with managing it are failing. This is a massive failure that is costing taxpayers dearly and is costing the environmental health of the Murray Darling Basin. Looking at the recommendations of the Royal Commission, one of the key recommendations is that, perhaps unsurprisingly, our policy should be based on science. The Royal Commissioner is clear that the amount of water that's been taken from our rivers needs to be scientifically determined and not compromised to the vested interests that have had an enormous influence on the way the basin is managed to date. A second key recommendation is around legality and questioning the legality of perhaps the Basin Plan itself, or certainly aspects of it. And that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who's watched Australian water politics over the last year. The Australia Institute and others warned that changes to the sustainable diversion limits that went through the Senate last year were probably unlawful. And now one of Australia's most eminent lawyers has agreed with us. So the legality of the plan and the way that water management runs in the basin is certainly under question. Thirdly, among these recommendations, there's a call for real transparency in the way we manage the Murray Darling Basin. The Royal Commission has described an unfathomable culture of secrecy that goes on within the basin's management organisations, and there's no better demonstration of that than the fact that the Murray Darling Basin Authority, the federal government and other federal agencies did everything they possibly could to avoid turning up to the Royal Commission and answering its questions. So there's a real need to end the culture of secrecy and have real transparency in the management of the Murray Darling Basin. I'll hand over to Maryanne, who might like to say a couple of things, and then we'll take a couple of questions.
Okay, thanks, Rod. It's important to remember that this is a $13 billion plan. This is a once in a generation or once in multiple generation opportunity to reverse a decline in our ecosystems and return water back to the environment. It's clearly failing. It's clearly failed in implementation, and the Royal Commission couldn't have been more clear about multiple and systemic levels of failure with that opportunity. We still have about $4 or $5 billion left to spend. We should take this opportunity to have a pause, really address those recommendations seriously, and rethink how the rest of that money is spent before it's too late, because we're not going to get another opportunity to fix it, in this generation anyway. The second point I would like to make is that there are lots of good scientists, good environmental water managers, both in the Murray Darling Basin Authority and in the broader water scientific community. The Commissioner's findings are quite clear that they're being ignored, that science is being hidden. There's no transparency around that science, and things are being made for political purposes rather than based on science. And it's really important that we go back to the really good underpinning of science that we have in the next phase of trying to get this thing back on track and implementing the Basin Plan properly to get better environmental outcomes.
I just wanted to ask you guys about, we're in a situation of sort of rare political consensus between the major parties at the moment. Did you risk blowing up the plan if you did have suggest such a major overhaul?
I think political consensus amongst the major parties has been part of the problem. A lot of the powers that be in relation to the Murray Darling Basin have worked really hard to silence critics and to not apply normal scientific questioning to the way the Basin Plan's being implemented. I think it's great that at last we're starting to see some difference between the major parties. We've seen Tony Burke go out and visit Menindee. We've seen Bill Shorten being concerned about the plight of the Lower Darling. It's about time we had high-level political attention on the Murray Darling Basin, and that's been lacking for some time. The fact that the management of the Murray Darling Basin has been able to take place in back rooms, far from the attention of people in the major cities or here in Canberra, is part of the reason that we're in the difficulties we're in today. I hope the Royal Commission's report shakes the political apathy of the major parties around exactly how this major reform's been working and has been managed.
That's Rod Campbell speaking there, and with him Maryanne Slattery from the Australia Institute, reacting to the final report of the Royal Commission into the Murray Darling Basin Plan. Among the points that they highlighted in that media conference, the report showing the Murray Darling Basin needs more water. The Murray Darling Basin Plan isn't working, they said, and a major overhaul is needed. They also said that heads need to roll at the Basin Authority. Science was ignored in favour of politics was another point, and there's been no transparency. That final report was released just a few hours ago.